Moving on to the next passage, we're going to skip 20, 21, and 22. They look to be general questions, and we want to do specific questions first. So the first question we're actually going to do in this passage is number 23. This is a tone question, so this one wants to know the tone of a particular section of the text. You might also get a question about the tone of a passage or the mood of a passage that the author is trying to create, or you might have questions about the attitude the author is trying to communicate. Regardless of which question type you're going to do, the key way to find out what the tone of a passage is, or the mood or the attitude of an author, is to look at the specific language, the word choice, diction, the words that the author has chosen to use to communicate that feeling or that tone. So when we look at this 23, we have to pay attention to the specific words, specific phrases that the author uses to help us see which choice is going to be the best. So what main effect do the quotations by Andrews in lines 10 to 18 have on the tone of the passage? So we're looking at the quotations by Andrews. Let's see. Fat is where it's at for a hibernator. So right away we see this opening quote, and the main thing that I notice here is it's quite informal, right? In fact, it's almost like he's using slang. Fat is where it's at, right? So this particular, I guess this is not the author's choice, it's more about what this particular scientist decided to say, but the scientist is using informal language here. Let's continue. Says Matthew Andrews, a molecular biologist at the University of Minnesota Duluth who studies 13-lined ground squirrels. You bring your own lunch with you. Packing lunch is necessary because the animals go on the world's strictest diet during the winter, surviving entirely off their white fat. They have their last supper in October. They don't eat again until March. So if we look at these quotes, you bring your own lunch with you, kind of implying, in some ways personifying the squirrels, saying that they bring their lunch with them, but that's obviously not what's going on. It's more just, again, this kind of informal tone. And maybe a little bit here, they have their last supper in October. You know, animals don't have suppers, but again, he's using this particular way of speaking to create a particular informal tone. Let's look at the choices. They create a bleak tone, focusing on the difficulties hibernators face during the winter. I mean, they do mention that they need to go on the world's strictest diet during the winter, but that's not part of the quote, and that's not really creating much of a bleak tone, so we can get rid of A. They create a conversational tone, relating scientific information in everyday language. Absolutely, right? Here's the everyday language. Fat is where it's at. You bring your own lunch. They have their last supper, right? Very simple conversational language, so that looks like a good choice. C, they create an ominous tone, foreshadowing the dire results of Andrews' research. Number one, there's no ominous tone here. Nothing indicating that something bad's going to happen. And if, as we read through the passage, we're going to see that there's no actual dire results of this research. So we can get rid of C. They create an absurd tone, using images of animals acting as if they were human. So be careful with this one, especially with this part, packing lunch is necessary. It's giving this image of, again, as if animals are like packing their lunch or bringing their lunch with them. So certainly there's some personification here. But in the end, it's not really creating an absurd tone. Again, it's more the author or the speaker is being informal, being conversational, trying to explain scientific ideas in simple ways, not trying to create an absurd tone. The author is, the scientist is not literally saying that the animals pack their lunch and have their last supper in October, right? It's not literal. It's more metaphorical, more conversational. So we can get rid of D. And the best answer is going to be B. To learn more about Reason Prep's SAT, SAT subject test, and ACT video courses, go to reasonprep.com/enroll, and you can find the link in the description below the video.